The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. This is part 15 of this video series that is predicting that Trump's victory rally in Washington, D.C. on January 19th at the Capital One Arena will be bombed, J.D. Vance will die, and Trump will die on February 13th. I recommend watching these videos in chronological order, and I will leave the numbers for the videos either in the title or description box. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who will rise to power as a result of the predicted bombing. Player number 4+4 was the MVP for Washington when the Capitals won their first ever Stanley Cup in their 44th season on June 7th, 2018. The Stanley Cup Finals was won by Washington in Paradise, Nevada, which is a part of the Las Vegas area. George Washington was born on the date 2/22. The Washington Capitals win in Paradise, Nevada on June 7th, 2018 was exactly 22 weeks before the prophetic apocalyptic fire and evacuation in Paradise, California, otherwise known as the Camp Fire. Incidentally, we are talking about the predicted evacuation and bombing in Washington, D.C. Again, the Washington Capitals' first ever Stanley Cup came in their 44th season because the 44th president is the Antichrist who will rule from Washington. That win was in Paradise, Nevada, exactly 22 weeks before the Paradise, California fire, and again, Washington was born on the date 2/22. The Paradise, California fire was exactly 220 days before prophetic upper level and attic fire on Paradise Boulevard in Las Vegas on Pentecost on June 16th, 2019. The smoke from this fire went all over the Las Vegas area. Pentecost is prophetic here because the disciples were waiting in the upper level when tongues of fire came down at the beginning of the church age. So that's why the upper level and attic fire of this 2-story building, which parallels the 2-story building in the book of Pentecost, in the book of Acts on Pentecost, the upper level, okay. In the Bible, it was tongues of fire that came down upon the disciples who were waiting in the upper room. On Pentecost, a different Pentecost in the Bible, Joshua led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho before they collapsed due to an earthquake, which caused the burning of Jericho. And archaeology proves that the walls of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. The Israelites marched around these walls and then blew trumpets and shouted, and then the walls of security collapsed, but they collapsed due to an earthquake, an act of God. This was on Pentecost. It's clear from the text, but also God demonstrated this overwhelmingly in 2018, 19, and 20. These trails of signs that paralleled the timing of events in the book of Joshua that climaxed on Pentecost. Therefore, confirmation that the walls of security collapsed on Jericho on Pentecost. Okay? When the prediction being made in this video comes to pass, it'll prove what I have just said, incidentally. because it will prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And the true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections demonstrated what I just said. That Pentecost was the climax of the parallel of signs with the timing of events in the book of Joshua. They're amazing. The trail of signs that God did in those years are amazing. Now, okay. Now, Jericho burned. When the walls of security collapsed, Jericho burned, which is confirmation for this connection here of the Paradise, California fire connecting to the Paradise Boulevard fire in Las Vegas on Pentecost. Okay? But, as I'm about to explain, there's more. Well, actually, I don't explain it right here. So let me just add right here. On this day of Pentecost, when the fire took place on Paradise Boulevard in Las Vegas, which connected with the Stanley Cup win in Paradise, Nevada, in the Las Vegas area, with 22 weeks and 220 days, which is Washington symbolism. On this June 16th, 2019 date, as I was mentioning, it was a climax of the parallel of signs with timing of events in the book of Joshua. And that's why on this day, on Pentecost, we received the rare 3.2 magnitude earthquake in Jericho, Washington State. When that happened, as expected in advance, I had to go for a long walk. By the way, it was a 3.2 magnitude earth. There's lots more to this. I'm about to get to it, I do believe. Yes, I am. So, okay, I am jumping ahead. But it was a 3.2 magnitude earthquake, and that's because the Antichrist's name is Obama, and it is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. But also 32 is equal to, in simple English gematria, the word bomb. And that's what we are talking about in this video, the predicted bombing in Washington. And that's why the Antichrist's name is Obama. It's because it hints at Obama, who will become the president again as a result of the predicted bombings. Okay. Now, on Pentecost on June 16th, 2019, 500,000 St. Louis Blues hockey fans shouted at the Gateway Arch in celebration of their first ever Stanley Cup win. In the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gate. That's why God is using the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, otherwise known as the Gateway to the West. And it's also the location that it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Okay? And that's why. Because of the symbolism of it being symbolic of judgment, but also there's more. It's also symbolic of the door portal, and it is through a door portal that the demons will enter the earthly realm. And so, anyway, back to what I was saying about the St. Louis Blues here. On this prophetic Pentecost that I've begun describing, they celebrated, they shouted, and it was on Pentecost. By the way, that's more confirmation of what I said a minute ago, which is that it was on Pentecost that the Israelites shouted and then the walls of security collapsed. More than that, the St. Louis Blues were known that year, that prophetic 2019 year, the St. Louis Blues were known for shouting. Let me explain a little bit. because I explain it in another video, and it's a lot. It's a big, long story. It's amazing. But they started playing the 1980s pop song Gloria by Laura Branigan after winning hockey games in celebration in the locker room. This spread to the wider culture of St. Louis. By the time they won their first playoff series that year, the local music station played the song Gloria for 24 hours straight. So, and Gloria is a shouting song. The chorus of the song is Gloria. It's a big, long shouting of Gloria over and over. Gloria. Okay, so, but that's prophetic. That's biblical. Gloria. Okay, the glory of Christ's victory over Satan and death. Now, which is what's symbolized in the overcoming of the taking of the promised land, which the Israelites did with Jericho. Now, back to what I was saying. So anyway, that was more proof of what I'm saying about. By the way, right now I'm speaking to Bible geeks, if you will, those that are really interested in this sort of thing, these details. If you aren't into the Bible yet, and this is new to you, I apologize for going on. Let's continue with what I have to say here, though. I don't really apologize. You'll want to get into this when you become a Christian, and hopefully when the prediction comes to pass, that will clear up any misunderstandings you have, or rather force you to, or compel you to look into the supposed reasons you have for believing that it isn't true, because you are wrong. That's the purpose of the prediction. So look into it. You know, if I had an opportunity to talk with you one-on-one, I could probably answer a lot of the hang-ups you have, but I don't have that opportunity, so you're going to have to do it yourself. You have the internet, and that's, by the way, one reason why you won't be forgiven if you do not repent before you die. If you are a Westerner and have had exposure to the gospel, right? You're in a different boat than those in a country like Thailand or those who were born before Christ. Wake up. You are not in a good position if you are a Westerner and you have rejected the Bible and the God of the Bible. So, back to what I was saying. When the St. Louis Blues won their first Stanley Cup win, they beat the Boston Bruins, the same team they lost to in their last Stanley Cup appearance, 7 times 7 years earlier. That's more Pentecost, or rather, Book of Joshua symbolism. Because the Israelites marched around the walls of security once per day for 7 days, and then on their 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. 3 sets of 7. But that's also a 7 times 7 in that, which is why the shouting occurred on Pentecost at the end of the 7 times 7 years since their last Stanley Cup appearance, which was coincidentally against the same team, the Boston Bruins. It's not a coincidence. It's designed by God, and that's a big, important thing I'll explain here. In their loss to the Bruins 7 times 7 years earlier, they lost in 4 games when Boston player number 4, Hall of Famer Bobby Orr, scored the winning goal 40 seconds into overtime. Right after scoring, player number 4 was tripped by St. Louis player number 4. It sent him flying into the air, and this engendered the most iconic sports photo in history and the most famous hockey goal in history. Player number 4's flying goal. And the photo, caused by St. Louis player number 4, hints at the rapture of God's faithful into the air when they are evacuated from the Antichrist 44th president. After losing in 4 goals, and so I don't elaborate here, I think on the purpose of the Boston Bruins, but they hint at the spiritual founding of America, which was in God, with the Pilgrims, with the Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony. Furthermore, the Boston Bruins play right at the mouth of the Charles River, where John Winthrop's flotilla of ships entered when they arrived. Okay, there's lots more to it. That's what Boston symbolizes. Anyway, let's get back to it. Now, so the flying goal, after losing in 4 games with player number 4's goal, the St. Louis Blues finally won their first Stanley Cup in their 4th Stanley Cup Finals appearance. The St. Louis Blues nickname is Blue and Whites, and things Israeli are also colloquially known or called Blue and White. There's even a political party named Blue and White. The Israel flag is blue and white. The NHL was founded in 1917. The same year, but not only the same year, I forgot to mention, it's the same exact month of the beginning of Israel with the Balfour Declaration, which said that Jews could legally emigrate to Israel as a homeland for the Jewish people. It declared Palestine to be a homeland for the Jewish people and allowed for the emigration of Jews back to Israel. The Balfour Declaration, November 1917, the same month that the NHL was founded. The NHL expanded in 1967 with 6 additional teams, including the St. Louis Blues, which was the last of the 6 1967 expansion teams to win the Stanley Cup, which was again in 2019. Okay, the Blues were the last of the 6 expansion teams to win the Stanley Cup. And again, the NHL expanded in 1967. And again, the NHL was founded in the same month that Israel was founded. In 1967, Israel expanded its territory as a result of the 6-Day War, hence the 6 expansion teams in the NHL in 1967, because Israel expanded its territory as a result of the 6-Day War. The St. Louis Blues are named after the genre of music that typically uses trumpets. Before the Israelites shouted, they blew trumpets. On Pentecost in 2019, Israel named a new settlement in the Golan Heights Trump Heights. And at the time, it had 110 houses. Joshua died at the age of 110 after he led the Israelites in a symbolic 3 sets of 7, a 7 plus a 7 times 7, around the walls of security of Jericho before they blew trumpets and shouted, and the walls collapsed due to an earthquake on Pentecost. On Pentecost, June 16th, 2019, there was a rare 3.2 earthquake in Jericho, Washington, and this was 110 days after the collapse of a section of the Jerusalem security wall due to heavy rains, an act of God. Jericho, Washington is just a few miles downriver from the historic Hanford nuclear site where the bombs that were dropped on Japan were made. 110 weeks prior to the earthquake at Jericho, Washington, tunnel walls collapsed on rail cars carrying plutonium at the Hanford nuclear site. There was a complete evacuation of the 4,800 workers at the site. Barack Obama is predicted to become the 48th president as a result of the predicted nuclear bomb and evacuation in New York City on January 29th. On the same day of the disaster at the Hanford nuclear site, Obama delivered his first speech since having left office, and God uses firsts for signs. It was to a leftist organization named Seeds and Chips, which hints at the Antichrist taking complete control over the food supply and using digital currency, hence the chips, computer chips, to restrict the buying and selling of rationed food. In 22 AD, Caesar Augustus took complete control of the food supply of Rome. Obama was born 2 + 2 days into the month of August, the month named after Augustus. He was born, and by the way, the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22. And the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through the rationed food that will have been restricted from being bought and sold through the programmable digital currency. The number 22 symbolizes the mark because the inverse of the mark in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav letter, and in ancient Israel or Hebrew, the Tav was a symbol for a mark. Also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, which come in pairs of 2 arms each, 2 and 2. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the Tav is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. That's why Caesar Augustus took complete control of the food supply in 22 AD. It was for the purpose of pointing to the Antichrist, who will do the same, who was born on the 2 + 2 day of the month of August, named after Augustus. Obama was born on the date 84, and 84 is the equivalent of the word bomb and the name Obama in Hebrew gematria, which is why God is playing on this name Obama to hint at Obama. The disaster and panicked evacuation of the Hanford nuclear site was 110 weeks before the earthquake at Jericho, Washington, just downriver, on Pentecost. And this extremely prophetic Pentecost, when the Blues fans shouted, is 70 plus 7 times 70.00% of a calendar year before the predicted bombing in Washington. Okay, that's a connection to the Washington state earthquake here, the Jericho earthquake, and also connection to the plutonium rail cars that were collapsed upon by the tunnel walls, as in walls of security collapsing in God's judgment on Jericho. Washington on Pentecost, okay, and this extremely prophetic, okay, yes, so 70 plus 7 times 70.00% of a year, that's a clear 3 sets of 7, because again, the Israelites marched around once per day for 7 days and then on the 7th day, marched around 7 times and blew 7 trumpets. That's a 7 plus a 7 times 7. That's why the 70 plus a 7 times 70.00% of a year. Amazing. It's exact, right? So that's why it's a confirmation of it too. It's a 0.00%. Now, the 44th president's speech and the disaster and evacuation at the Hanford nuclear site on May 17th, 2017 are 400 weeks and 4 days before the predicted bombing in Washington. That will lead to the return of the 44th president, Obama. That's amazing, right? 400 weeks and 4 days is also this connection. So from the Hanford nuclear site, which is this bomb sign, right? I recognized this, by the way, many years ago. I've known for years that the Hanford nuclear site disaster and evacuation was pointing to the upcoming explosion of a nuclear material bomb in New York City and evacuation. I've known that since, let's see, at least 2020. But no, 2019, really, because of the Manhattan blackout in July of 2019, okay? Well, anyway, that at some point led me to find about the prophetic, and there's more details. Of course there's more details. That's how God's signs works. I just can't explain everything. Furthermore, I don't remember them all. Can't remember everything. But there's there's another 110 in that sign in itself even. I forget. Like it cost $110 million to clean up or something, because that's what's going on at the Hanford nuclear site. That's why the disaster. It was part of this cleanup process to get rid of the plutonium at the site. But there's another 110. I think it's 110 million is what it was costing to get all. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's it. But that was 110 weeks before the earthquake just downriver from the plutonium site, right? Anyway, I've known since then, since this would be a major sign that would ultimately point to the date of the bomb and evacuation in New York City. Only recently did I recognize that there would also be a bomb in Washington. Well, anyway, and I don't think the bomb in Washington will be nearly as big as the one in New York City. Anyway, so from the Hanford, and that's also again the day of Obama's first speech, and it was an Antichrist speech because it was to the leftist organization about seeds and chips, which is exactly what the Antichrist will do. He will restrict the buying and selling of food through the digital chips. Now, that day, okay, it connects two ways to this January 19th date, this prediction. It connects with exactly, first of all, a straight direct connection of 400 weeks and 4 days. And that's amazing because we are talking about the 44th president, who his name is Obama, and he will become the president again as a result of the bombing, but also at the other end of the 400 weeks and 4 days is the 44th president's speech. Now, that day also connects through this Pentecost that I've been elaborating on. Again, it's 110 weeks to that day, that Pentecost with the earthquake in Jericho and the blues shouting and all of that, the 110 houses at the Trump Heights in Golan and on and on. Okay, and that day is itself an amazing 70 plus 7 times 70.00%. Do you realize how amazing that is? We are talking about the blues shouting on Pentecost at the end of the trail of signs that led the parallel of that parallel the timing of events in the book of Joshua, and it is in Joshua where they had a 7 plus a 7 times 7 symbolism enactment before the walls of security collapsed. And it's from this prophetic Pentecost that we have this 7 plus a 7 times 7 connection to the predicted collapse of America's walls of security with the bombing of the president before he takes power so that he can't take power. And again, the Israelites blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed. The collapse of trumpet right before his inauguration is the walls of security of America collapsing in God's judgment. Now, Joshua, who died at 110, led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho for 7 days. The collapse of the tunnel walls, I left out the most important word there. The collapse of the tunnel walls onto rail cars carrying plutonium on May 17th, 2017 is 110 times 7% of a year before the predicted suitcase nuke or dirty bomb or bombs plural in Manhattan and the evacuation, and again there was an evacuation of the Hanford nuclear site on January 29th, 2025. Since we are on the subject in this video of Caesar Augustus and how this points to Barack Obama, who was born in August on the 2nd plus 2nd day, which is why Caesar Augustus again took control of the food supply in 22 AD. There are more prophetic parallels or hints that God has designed here to identify Obama and what is going on. Caesar Augustus rose to power during the Civil War in ancient Rome, which is exactly what we are going through now. And the war ended in 31 AD when Caesar Augustus followed or chased Mark Antony back to Egypt. That's astounding because the opening verse of Isaiah chapter 31 is, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt and rely on horses," which is incidentally why God has used the Triple Crown winner American Pharaoh in his signs, the first Triple Crown winner in 444 months, which hints at the 44th president. Incidentally, Caesar Augustus's uncle, which is how he came to power, was Julius Caesar, who was assassinated in 44 BC. Okay, so that's also confirmation here. I need to correct something that I think I might have said earlier. Caesar Augustus took control of the food supply in 22 BC, not AD, if I had said AD. And incidentally, 22 BC is 22 years after the assassination in 44 BC. Also, so we have, and the Isaiah chapter 31, back to Isaiah chapter 31, which begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt and rely on horses." Well, Mark Antony, after his defeat at sea, fled with his navy, if you will, to Egypt with Cleopatra, and then was killed by Augustus in Egypt. So he went down to Egypt, which is the symbolism here. He went down to Egypt. Isaiah chapter 31 begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt," which is incidentally why one of the first things Barack Obama did, well, essentially it was the first thing he really did, was go down to Egypt for his big Cairo, Egypt speech in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation, because he is the Antichrist. And that is what he did. That's not really a hyperbole. And so, also, by the way, that day was exactly 3,000 days before the eclipse over America that peaked over the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. 3,000 because the Israelites, after they left Egypt, rebelled at Mount Sinai, and 3,000 souls perished in their rebellion. Back to this 31 BC and the end of the long, terrible civil war in Rome. It was Mark Antony that fled to Egypt, the leader of the other side of the civil war, and that symbolism for the mark, which is again going to be enforced with food when the Antichrist Obama, who was born in August, takes control of the food supply. So that's why his name is Mark. It's also not an accident that the head guy who came to power at the, I'm going to avoid saying the name of the agency that he heads in Washington, D.C., whose name in Italian means sickle, came to power on the exact day that the movie The Killing Fields was released, November 2nd, 1984. And his first name is Anthony. Okay, well, it's abbreviated to the Tony, right? But that's also why Mark Anthony, because the thing that he was responsible for is the mark of the Antichrist. No, I take that back. No, the media went with his full name. So the Anthony guy, whose surname begins with a F and ends with an ouchie, that guy. The Italian, which also hints back to ancient Rome, he came to power on November 2nd, 1984, the day that the movie The Killing Fields was released, and that's, of course, implication from God of what I am saying that the mark of the Antichrist is. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.